good news and bad news about money, or whatever is money today, because we don't know what it is anymore. But there's a lot of rumor about the Fed coin and CBDC, central bank digital currency. There's also Bitcoin. So the question is, what is money and what does it mean? And anytime there's a big change, there's always the rumor goes up and speculation and panic and all this. I like pictures. Like what you have here is what's going on. You have here, this is your savings, your asset. So you have $1 million or 100,000, that's your asset. But the moment you put it in the bank, it becomes the bank's liability. The banksters have to then take your money and they have to buy another type of asset to make sure they can pay you the interest on your savings here. And what happened with Silicon Valley Bank, what they put their money into is all these debts and all these things, and the bank's assets went bad. And that's when the runs of the banks start. People want their savings back. And that's where we're in serious, serious trouble right now. And then when you talk about Orwellian, George Orwell wrote 1984. And what 1984 is, Big Brother is watching. And the big concern with Fed now, or Fed coin, the central bank digital currency, CBDC, is we lose our privacy, that they'll track us. They'll track every move because they'll know everything we're spending money on, what we spend it on, who we give it to, and all this. So it becomes George Orwell's 1984. Big Brother will watch you via our money. And that's the problem with central bank CBDC, central bank digital currency, or the Fed coin. People like me panic. I said, oh my God, they're going to track me. I don't want them to know when I'm spending my money. It's none of their business. But now with, blockchain and all this, they can track anything they want. As we're talking today, people are finally waking up to what Gerald Celente says, the banksters. What bank is safe right now? And we have things like the FDIC, Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, that's supposed to protect you up to $250,000. So if you have $250,000 of your savings, supposedly the FDIC will protect you. But what happened was Silicon Valley Bank, it was in the billions over here. And that's when Jerome Powell, the Fed, and the FDIC got together and said, we have to bail these guys out. And that's called the moral hazard there. The moral hazard is that's the end of capitalism. How do you bail out the rich? And a lot of those rich guys are the Silicon Valley guys that took down Trump, in my opinion. One can't prove that. But this whole thing is, the scientific term is one big effing mess. When George says central planners, he's talking about Marxism, central bank. And that's what our founding fathers, that was Thomas Jefferson, he says, we got to stay away from that one. Because if we go to a central bank, he said, our children will wake up homeless. And look at homelessness today is going through the roof. This stuff has been going on since the 1700s. And everybody can sort of see it. And that's why the FDIC are panicking, because if you have like $250,000, let's say you have $1 million, does that mean you only get $750,000 back if you lose everything? Or is the FDIC, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, going to bail out your $1 million too? And that's the uncertainty, because money is confidence, and our confidence is gone today. Can we step back to Jeff Snyder? He talks about the euro dollar. The euro dollar means European dollar. It's dollars outside of America, which are then creating more money outside of America. There's trillions of euro dollars as well as US dollars. This thing's a big mess. It's like the big house of cards is set to come down, because the cash is trash right now. And Rich Dad Poor Dad says savers are losers. The rich don't work for money and all these things. Entrepreneurs like me, I stay out of paper, anything that's printed. So, took a company public. I own the paper. The IPO produces the shares, but I own the shares. I don't want to buy somebody else's shares of somebody else's company, because that's what another term is called counterparty risk. It's in control of somebody else, not me. It kind of bugs me. George was at our 3-day and he went into inverse yield curves. A couple of minds shifted gears. And George very simply says, we're into it right now. It's not tomorrow. It's not maybe. It's right now.
I use the example of a tsunami. I think it paints a perfect mental picture for people, because we know that a tsunami, when it's way out at sea, although you have this powerful force that's coming at land at, let's say, 100, 200 miles per hour, you can't see it. They could go right under a boat and, they wouldn't even know. But what happens there are these detection buoys that advanced countries have. They're 100 miles out off of shore, let's just say. And that detection buoy can sense that force coming toward the shore. And so then it sends a signal up to a satellite, and that satellite signals the scientists that are on the shore to go ahead and warn the general public.
Well,
now, they don't know exactly when it's going to hit. They don't know where it's going to hit or how it's going to play out, but they just know this thing is headed at you at 100 miles per hour. That is basically what the yield curve does for us.
Okay, so what we're saying, ladies and gentlemen, it's here. Crack is shown in how fake this whole system is. This whole monetary system that just creates money out of nothing. And when America started paying its bills just by creating money out of nothing, it's going to come back. And right now, and that's what Andy Schechner is talking about, the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, Saudi Arabia, Mexico, Japan, and New Zealand, and Australia. The American empire is going down. And that means the dollar is possibly going down. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's why what George is saying is crucial. And my job is to keep it as simple as possible. And when George says Orwellian, they're talking about 1984. We're here right now. All these REITs, real estate investment trusts, it's just foolish to me. I won't touch that stuff because it's all fake. It's all fake. But anyway, this is kind of the start of our problems here one more time. So you save money and you put it in the bank, but your money is your asset, but it becomes the bank's liability. Just remind you of that. And what happened was then the banks have to buy something, the banksters, they have to buy something to cover the interest they're paying you here. And so they bought all these T-bills and this and that and all this crap, I thought. And then all of a sudden people realized the bank couldn't cover it all. And that's when the savers start running back to the bank, give me my savings back. And that was what the FDIC, Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, was for, to make sure that they would give you money back. But these banks had created so many fake assets out here, they couldn't cover it. And so that's when Janet Yellen, who's head of the Treasury, and the Fed says, we'll guarantee all these loans. In other words, the Fed and the Federal Reserve Bank, which is not really a bank, and the U.S. Treasury says, we'll back up anybody right now. And that's when George was at he says, the crack in the foundation has been seen, and they're trying to fill that crack up. Anyway, it's a really frightening time, but the average person is completely clueless because they can't see this. So that's why George had showed the group on inverse yield curves, which blew my brain apart, about what's going on. And so a picture sometimes worth 10 million words. So George, show us this picture you showed us at the 3-day in Scottsdale.
Yes, and this is the tsunami warning system that we were referring to, but probably more importantly, if we switch to that chart of the inverted yield curve, and what we can see is the 2-year Treasury yield is higher than the 10-year. So just right off the bat, if I ask you, Robert, if you're going to lend someone money for 30 years, are you going to charge them a higher or lower interest rate than if you lend them money for 3 weeks? Well, the answer is going to be a lot higher interest rate because there's a lot more risk.
For the longer term.
That's right. So when we see the short-term interest rates higher than the long-term interest rates, that's the tsunami, the economic tsunami warning signal, right, saying, hey, something is really, really wrong. And most likely we're going to have a significant recession or depression in the near future. Now, what does that mean? How do you time this? Well, what we've seen going all the way back to 1950.
Oh, wait, George, it's already hit. That was Silicon Valley Bank and Deutsche Bank and Credit Suisse. It's already hit.
This is just the first cracks that you see in the system, but the dam hasn't yet broken.
Correct.
And so that's what the yield curve is telling us. So when the dam breaks, how do we time that? How do we know when that's going to happen, assuming that Silicon Valley Bank is just the first crack? Well,
what do they call it? The canary in the coal mine?
The canary in the coal mine. You got it. It's just this huge red flag.
But then Credit Suisse went down. Deutsche Bank and the Bank of Japan's next. This is a global crash.
Yeah, you don't know which bank is next. The whole global economy is very vulnerable. And this is what that yield curve is telling us. So what people really need to be cognizant of is when the 2-year yield goes back down below the 10-year, because when the yield curve is no longer inverted, that's when we usually get the recession or economic depression. And so right now, what the smart money is telling us through that curve is that we're most likely going to have that toward after the summer or going into the fall of 2023 or the winter, spring 2024.
What George is talking about, that NOAA, that buoy system, is I know exactly what that thing does. And like I said, I went to the Merchant Marine Academy in New York, and at sea, it doesn't bother you. It's just this big swell. But when it hits the shore, it just destroys it. The Silicon Valley Bank was the first casualty, and then Swiss Credit Suisse and Deutsche Bank and Nexus Bank of Japan. Before the wave hits, it has to suck all the water out of the bay. And what happens then, Sarah, all these fish are jumping around out on because all the water's gone. And all these yo-yos go running out to catch the fish. And then the wave hits them, tears everything apart, people die. I mean, it's just, I grew up with all this going, why would somebody go there? You can go to the store and buy some fish, but just free fish. And that's what George is saying. When the Fed pivots, everybody can say, oh, happy days are here again. That's like free fish. Yeah, I'm going to buy more real estate because the interest rates are down. And they're going to rush back in and the free fish is going to kill them. Now, how do you prepare for this giant tsunami? I think it's the biggest in the world because it's global. And the reason I say that is what people do in the investment world. They wait for something to be expensive. Oh, the price of gold is going up, or the price of real estate is going up. But they wait until the price is high and then they jump in. I hear that, should I jump in now? I said, no, you should have been jumped in a long time ago. Surfing all the time, they wait until the wave is breaking, then they take off and they get crushed. It happens all the time. And the average person waits till it's high. That's the difference. That's why I talk about the metaphor of the humans running down to the water to catch the free fish. Meanwhile, in Indonesia, during the Banda Aceh era tsunami, the animals were heading for the hills. But so right now, I'd be heading for the hills. I wouldn't be heading for the free fish. And don't be one of those persons jumping into the water looking for free fish. Be one of the stupid animals heading for the hills right now.